All right, we will get started now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Monday motivation. Today, we're going to talk about recognizing triggers and how to cope with them. And we have a very special guest joining us. So I'd like to introduce Karen Del Maestro. Did I say it right, Karen?
I know. Del Maestro. Don't worry. So many people say it exactly the way that you did, Terry.
Okay, so welcome, Karen. Karen is a health and transformation and calmness coach. So just the word calm makes me wanted to have her join us. Calm is something I'm always looking for. But she has been working in the health and wellness field for over 20 years. But it was after her own breast cancer and BRCA2 diagnosis in 2018 that she realized she was uniquely qualified to serve breast cancer survivors, just like all of us. So helping them after treatment has ended, calming their minds, getting back their get up and go, stop putting their needs on the back burner, and feel amazing in the skin they are in, no matter how many scars they may have. So Karen specializes in working with breast cancer survivors, genetic mutation carriers, and healthy lifestyle seekers. So Karen, do you want to go ahead and get started today?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you, Terry, for inviting me into your group and to being part of your Motivation Monday here. It's always an honor to be invited to get to chat with other groups of within the breast cancer community, right? So thank you for having me. And today we're going to be talking about recognizing emotional triggers and how to cope with them. And I think that October is the perfect time, if there is a perfect time, to really have this conversation. And so I first want to say that no matter what you are feeling this month, whether you are feeling kind of overwhelmed with all of the pink ribbons that you might be seeing, maybe you might be feeling frustrated at something that's now called pink washing, and seeing big brand names putting ribbons on products that have been known to possibly cause cancer. Or maybe, and this is kind of me, you fall into a mixed bag of emotions, right? Where you might feel triggered. You might feel perhaps frustrated or upset at how breast cancer is being used in commercial products. But you may also feel blessed and grateful that you're here to get to help raise awareness of this disease and what it's like going through the journey and beyond, right? Because I'm sure, as you realize, if you're done with active treatment, we're not done when active treatment is done. So I first wanted to recognize that no matter how you're feeling, I want you to know that we get it, that we understand, and that your feelings are real and valid. So please know that. Now, when we talk about recognizing emotional triggers, what does that mean? Well, triggers are normally something that happen after we have gone through some kind of trauma. And breast cancer is a trauma. Hearing those words, and I say for me, they were spine-chilling words. You have breast cancer. That in that very moment, I thought, am I going to die? That is a traumatic moment, right? Even if you were diagnosed with stage 0, DCIS, all the way up to and there's nothing even or just about being diagnosed with stage 4. But what I've recognized as I've spoken to many women in the breast cancer communities, that moment felt the same for almost everybody. Quickly shifting depending on the stage, but in that very first moment. So that is the moment that we end up being traumatized by breast cancer. It then becomes a trauma. And as you may well be aware, right, we go into survival mode. For me, it was kind of like, okay, Karen, pull up your big girl panties, get on with it, and do what you got to do to beat this thing. It was very much, okay, get on with it, do what I need to do. And again, that's something that I recognize often happens. But as we go through this journey, and when we're done as well, but especially as we're going through it, very often we're not realizing the emotional and mental impact that the trauma is having on us, because we're in survival mode, right? We're in what's commonly known as fight or flight. Well, there are actually 4 automatic trauma responses that I will talk to you about today, because that's part of the way that you get to recognize your emotional triggers, is by recognizing how you respond. Okay, so what might be a trigger for you? Well, our triggers can be any of our 5 senses. And that could be something that you see, so it could be a pink ribbon or even the color pink. It could be the smell of the hospital or a doctor's office as you walk through the door. It could be the taste. Maybe it's a metallic taste that you sense in your throat and in your mouth, maybe as you're having an IV of some kind, or maybe you're having a CT scan or an MRI and they're injecting you with contrast and you get that metallic taste. Maybe it's something that you felt while you were getting chemotherapy, right? It could be the touch of something. For some people, they relate to the touch of the gown that they wore as they were going in to see their doctor, and every time they go to see the doctor. And it can also be this sound. And I've even heard stories of the sound of the white crinkly paper when you sit on it on your doctor's examination table. And so all of our senses can recognize triggers that we may not even realize. Over 10 years ago, I was in a severe car accident. And what still will trigger that PTSD in my body is the sound of a glass shattering. So I have to be careful when I'm watching movies or even on TV. If I know a car accident's coming up, I'm okay. If I don't know that's going to happen, my body will automatically seize up like this. And it's the sound. It's not the sight. It's the sound. And so recognize that our body automatically stores, right, these responses. Now, what might trigger you, right? We said could be the sound of, could be the sight of a pink ribbon. It could also be, and I know, Terry, if you want to pop on here, you and I were talking earlier about when we know that we're going for a scan, right? We're heading in for a scan and dealing with that scanxiety, as we call it. That anxiety is coming up. So what is it for you, Terry? Is it the unknown that causes that anxiety for you? Is it the head starts to spin on the what if? Is it going into the environment? What is it for you that causes that your anxiety levels to raise?
For me, it was always, and I say was because I've gotten better now at managing it, but it was always that fear of what could happen.
Yeah.
I would start to make it a reality in my head when nothing had happened.
Yeah.
you know, we
Yeah.
start worrying about things that aren't even real. And that's how I figured it out is it's not even real. I'm making these things up in my head as possibilities.
Mm.
And that was the big trigger. And it would be like, extreme anxiety and just the impact to our bodies when we have those thoughts is amazing. Our bodies are amazing things, but it takes it on for us. Um, but I've gotten better in that I understand what's happening when it starts to happen. Because for me, before a scan, it would be um, a week, even 2 weeks prior. I just look at my calendar and see that's coming up, and I would immediately start this problem, this, the anxiety. But now understanding why I'm feeling that way has helped me. Recognizing what's happening helps me cope with it. It's when we don't even really understand what's happening is when it's difficult to cope.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why we talk about those things, right? Is to raise awareness so that you feel empowered to make those shifts. And I think that, and I used to deal with anxiety very much the same. It was, and I used to use CBD oil to help with stress and anxiety to help because I knew it didn't feel good in my body. So it's like, okay, what can I do? Along with breath work, along with meditation, along with all of the holistic tools that I have in my toolbox, which like Terry is very robust, but it got to the point where nothing was really helping. And so, and I think also for me, Terry, and perhaps you can share your experience here too. What didn't help me was my logical brain saying, stop it. You've got nothing to worry about yet. You don't even know. And then it would just almost make it worse. And as somebody, I've always been a planner. I like to plan things. And I find that this is also kind of plays into that scan. But what if this happens? Then I should do this. And what if that happens? Then we'll go to plan B. And if that doesn't happen, then we'll go to plan C. And it's like we feel the need to have it all figured out. When in actuality, that feeling of trying to control everything and the outcomes and what to handle is actually part of an automatic trauma response. That is part of, we talked about fight or flight. There are 4: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. So for me, when I started to recognize more of what these automatic trauma responses, what the actions were that were linked to those things, for me, that helped me start to recognize when I was being triggered. So if I may, I'd like to share a little bit about each of those responses to help you start to recognize what's going on with you. Is that okay, Terry, if I go into those a little bit?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, awesome. So let's start with fight, right? Fight is one that we've heard of, that we all know. But what does it look like? Trying to control things is one of the fight responses. And here's the thing, and I'm going to invite you as I'm talking about these to look at them with observation and curiosity, okay? And not judge yourself, okay? Because it's not going to help, right? That's going to make you feel worse about it. These are automatic responses that are just programmed into our body from a time when we were traumatized. And that might be breast cancer, but it may also be, like me, a car accident or a divorce or the loss of a loved one or abuse of some kind. It could be so many things. Trauma comes in many shapes and sizes. I say little t, medium T, big T. And so those things and how we've responded in our life is stored in our body and in our brain. So they happen automatically. Therefore, we don't get to judge those things, right? So other fight responses, as you can imagine, would be things like anger outbursts. Maybe you find that you're getting more irritable, you're getting picky, and you're nitpicking at things, and people are rolling their eyes at you like, here she goes again. You may well have been triggered by something and might be back in that fight or flight response, right? It's called your sympathetic nervous system. And where we want to live, because when we're in our sympathetic nervous system, our cortisol, our stress hormone, is being elevated. And ultimately, without going too much into the science, it's causing an inflammatory response in our body. Inflammation is the root cause of all serious disease. That's why we want to try and minimize the amount of time that we're staying in survival mode. Okay, so for fight, again, we've got anger outbursts, trying to control everything and everybody, telling people what to do. Maybe you're the best at directing people, and feeling irritable. And I always say for me that you can be a mixture of these, but a way to notice that you're being triggered is if you're recognizing any of these behaviors, or perhaps you're recognizing that your response to something is bigger than what has actually happened. So you may go away afterwards and say, why did I yell like that? Was it really worth it? Like, did that warrant that response? That's one of your signs that you may have just been triggered. Okay? Again, be kind to yourself. Don't judge yourself. Just start to be aware. The next one is flight. Okay? Flight might look like, and this was a big one that I used to do a lot of, workaholism, throwing yourself into work, busyness, right? Perhaps you're a perfectionist. That can also be a flight response, needing everything to be just so, or even not trying something unless you feel that you can do it perfectly, right? Being afraid to fail. Overthinking, going to the what ifs. We were talking about anxiety and overthinking. Well, what if this and what if this and what if this? Then what does that person do? What does that person do? How does this affect? Right? You get the feeling of that overthinking mind. Anxiety, like we said, feeling your heart racing. Maybe your palms are getting sweaty. For me, when anxiety hits, I tend to have a hot flash. It's one of the signs for me that I can tell, because I don't have many of them these days. So it's one of the signs for me that I can tell that my heart is starting to race. And you might feel a little bit panicked or perhaps OCD about things. Those are all flight responses. Now, freeze. These two, freeze and fawn, F-A-W-N. I know it's hard with the accent. Everybody's like, huh? What are you saying there, Karen? So let's start with freeze. Freeze is more common than I think we realize. And again, most of us don't even know that it exists. So freeze might look like difficulty making decisions over things. You don't want to get the wrong decision. You might procrastinate. Again, not wanting to get something wrong. This can be a trauma response. You might feel stuck. You might numb yourself using food, alcohol, drugs, exercise, sex, if you can tolerate it after breast cancer. Some people can, some people can't. But these are all ways that we might numb ourselves, and drugs as well, if I didn't mention that. But often, and the most common, are food and alcohol. So that response to grab the bag of chips, or grab the tub of ice cream, or grab the bottle of wine might be a trauma response. It's just a learned response. If this happens, that's what I do. Okay. And the other big one for freeze, and this was one that has got Karen's name all over it, is isolating. Isolating. I cannot count how many times in my life, if something happened, my gut reaction was to remove myself, go to the bedroom, snuggle up under a snuggly blanket with a cup of tea, and watch Gilmore Girls on repeat. I used to even say, before I realized all of this about trauma responses, that I would say I'm going to go into my cave. I even put a name to it because that was my response. And the last one, and then I'm going to share with you some ways that you can cope when you realize that you're being triggered. The last one is fawn, as I said, Fawn. And that might look like fawning over others, right? What can you do to take care of everybody else so that the attention isn't on you but on others? So that might look like you're going into people pleasing. What can I do to make you happy? What can I do to make you happy? So much easier, right, than trying to figure out what we need. So much easier to focus on everybody else. You might notice that you ask yourself a lot, well, I don't even know who I am anymore. Because you're so used to looking after everybody else. You may have a hard time saying no, not knowing how to set boundaries. And you might feel overwhelmed a lot. Those are common fawn responses. Now, with this whole list, does that mean that every time you feel those, you're being triggered? No. But if it is a visceral response for you, I'm going to invite you to start thinking, what just triggered me? And recognize it. Because the more that you can become aware of what is causing the reaction, the sooner you get to go from sympathetic fight or flight survival mode into parasympathetic, what we call rest and digest mode. This is where we want to be. This is where our cortisol isn't going off the charts. This is where our inflammation levels are happier. This is where we live a healthier life. That's why it's so important. So how do we cope with these? As with anything, the first thing is to become aware, without judgment, of how you respond when you're triggered. And like I said, you may be like a whole, across the board, a whole collection of these. Or you may fall primarily into one category. That's okay. Doesn't matter. It is what it is. The key is recognizing that you're being triggered. And then, for instance, what I do, and I don't know if you can see, a couple of months ago, I had a surgery. It was a surgery to do 13 biopsies on some swollen lymph nodes in what's known as your mediastinum. That's the area under your rib cage that's next to your heart and your lungs and your esophagus. So it's a pretty important area. And I had a PET scan that showed up that these lymph nodes were all massively inflamed. So we do this surgery to get these biopsies. And I was told I had to wait 10 days for the results. Now, the old Karen would have been anxious for those 10 days. My head would have been spinning off to the what ifs. I would have thrown myself into work. And when I wasn't working, I would have been isolating with the blanket and the cup of tea and the Gilmore Girls. Because there's something about the cadence of that show is very relaxing for me. So what happened this time around was that I was calm. I was calm. And I had to question myself, and I even did it with my therapist, and I said, am I calm or am I numb? And we did a few things, and it's like, no, I'm really calm. And so when I did some self-reflection and said, okay, how did I do this? What I did was I recognized that I was being triggered. I recognized that what my the first thing I want to do always is isolate. And I said, Karen, what happens if you don't do that? And so that's what I did. I did not go into the bedroom. I'm not saying I didn't sit on the sofa with a cup of tea and called a dear, dear friend, which is not my norm. It's normally like, okay, Karen, figure it out on your own, right? Because I've always been the strong one, the one that fixes it, the one that helps everybody else. And so I've always had that mentality like, okay, figure it out on your own, Karen. But I didn't. I reached out to another breast cancer survivor, a dear friend of mine who I knew would not judge me. And she chatted, and she was actually going through something too, so it was perfect. We were there for each other. But that action of not doing what I would normally do, but still nourishing and nurturing myself, acknowledging that I was being triggered and that I still needed to take care of me, was how I coped. And so I invite you, as you start to recognize that you're being triggered and how you're responding to them, think about, how can I nourish myself through this by doing something that isn't what I've always done? That, and it may sound so simple, but let me tell you, that allowed me to stay calm for 10 days waiting for 13 biopsy results, which, thank you, all came back with no sign of cancer. But I stayed calm, and that means that you can too. This was the biggest shift that I made that allowed me to do that, and really recognizing what I would normally go to do on autopilot and choosing to do something differently. It's important to acknowledge how you feel. It's important to acknowledge that you are feeling triggered, but it doesn't mean that you have to handle it on your own. You've got Terry as an amazing leader in this group. And I know, like me, Terry, that you probably have lots of conversations, right, in the group and personally with people. And so know that you're not alone. Know that you're not alone. What resonated with you most, Terry, in that? Was it interesting to hear the different areas of trauma responses?
Well, with what really hit me was right at the end where you're talking about coping, but the word nurture, that's my word for the month. I'm trying to use it every day and then use, do what nurture means. Whether with the cooler weather, a cup of tea sounds even better. But I bought some new tea, so switching it up a little bit also helps me stay calm, because it's not the same old thing. It's something new. And so it adds a little excitement.
Yeah, I love that. So it's something that you would normally make a cup of tea, but just choosing a different flavor that's perhaps more seasonal, or something that is more nurturing or nourishing to your soul. I get chakra teas. I don't know if you're familiar with them, from Buddha Teas. And they have all the teas for all the different chakras in the body. And I love them because I get to say, okay, where do I need, what part of me needs nurturing? Where am I feeling this in my body? And then I choose a tea that relates to supporting that part of my body. And so there are so many little shifts that you can make. These do not need to be big. They do not need to be expensive or time consuming. For me, it's just like you're saying, Terry, that shift to, how do I nurture myself? That phrase alone is the game changer.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Absolutely.
You're making yourself matter. And you do matter.
Right.
Yeah.
That was wonderful, Karen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We've got several people watching. Do you have any questions before we hang up that we can answer? right now? Or do you have any comments you want to add? Okay, nothing so far, but we'll get this video. I'll get this video posted right away so that everyone can watch in the group that wants to on their own time. But even later, if you have questions or if you need some help with understanding anything that Karen talked about, go ahead and post the question and we'll make sure Karen gets back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And nothing is a silly question. I mean, that's something that I say all the time, right? Nothing at all is a silly question, because it's such an important topic. But no matter what you're going through, no matter what you do, it's nothing is a silly question. Mm-hmm. I see that one that just popped in there. Terry, did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I don't know if I can talk about that.
Yeah, I think my first question is to the person that's posting about Pedialyte and vomiting. Are you in active treatment right now, or are you done with treatment and dealing with anxiety because of it? Okay, so you're in treatment, you're currently going through chemotherapy. So this is not so much to do with being triggered and everything. This is more to do with a medical question due to going through treatment, correct? Okay, so my advice to you, I think Terry would probably share the same advice, of course, and I'm glad that you asked, but especially while you are in treatment, both Terry and I legally have to refer to your medical doctors. And of course, they're the ones that have your medical history anyway. It would be very remiss of either of us to answer those questions without knowing your medical history and treatment so far and all of those things. So I hope you understand. But if you're feeling that way, reach out to your doctors. That is what they are there for. And if they're not responding to you, keep bugging them. Unfortunately, we have to advocate for ourselves on this journey. But vomiting is unfortunately a response to chemotherapy that so many people have. And I know it's extraordinarily difficult, but your medical team is the one that is going to have the resources for you that are going to help as much as possible. And I'm so sorry to hear that you're stage 4 metastatic and have ovarian cancer too. We are extending a massive hug to you. Know that you're not alone. And
even the things you talked about, Karen, though, she's dealing with a lot, but she can still use some of the nurturing techniques that you discussed.
And I think anything that's going to help your mind stay as calm as possible is going to, when we talk about sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, and I hear this often from people who are living with stage 4, right? It's like they are literally in survival mode. And but I know of people that have lived with stage 4 for 20-something years. I'm not saying that that's the case for everybody. So we want to make sure that no matter where you are in that journey, that you understand that the more that you can calm your mind, the better it is physically for your body too. And I'm not saying it's easy. Please understand that. And I'm not saying that it happens at the click of a fingertip, because it doesn't. It does take practice. But nurturing yourself, loving yourself, and recognizing that whatever you're feeling is real is key. Is key. And I'm sorry, we can't It's very
Right.
difficult because we can't really be of more help, of course, but we can't really be of more help. We are legally bound by what we're able to do as health coaches, and we'd be remiss to make any other recommendations. So I apologize for that. I know it's difficult.
Yeah, Ella, she's saying that she just got on. So, Ella, I hope you can re-listen to the whole video. I think you might find some ideas to help you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Karen.
Such a pleasure. Thank you so
I
much for
can tell
having me,
that from,
Terry. Sorry, go ahead.
all right, we will hang up now. Karen, I'll put your contact information in our group too, so if they would like to reach out, they're able to.
Yes, please do. That would be great.
Oh, thanks,
Thank you for
everyone. You
having
have a
me.
great day.
Take care, everybody.
All right.
Bye. Thank
Goodbye.
you.